So we're here to solve this balance loop puzzle from guest contributor Jonas Gleim. We've got a theme called cross, and I see, well, it's a nice pattern of circles. None of the circles are in the corners. Corners are a particular weak point in balance loops because of how they'll work. And with most of these sort of in the interior grid, or at least the interior of sides, it's not like anything around like any white or black that looks key. So it's going to be around one of these number clues that will be important. The 4 actually has all of its options pretty cleanly set. This 4 also sort of around it. I think the one that's most constrained is the 6 in white, so let's look at it. First thing to note for sure is coming to the right is a problem because it's going to cause imbalance with the circle immediately to its right. There's nothing that's particularly of an issue of coming down or to the top, so my guess is we've got to look at what happens when we go to the left. If we go to the left, we're going to need to get another white circle that's going to come up or down. But note that what it does at the same time is forces the 4 to do this. And that looks like a deadly pattern that there's no space for the loop to go 3 in a direction that's not going to have the 4 clue turn into it. And so the very first thing I see in the grid is we can draw this shape of the 6 coming straight up and down. And hopefully that gets us enough of a start. We'll see in a second if it does. It still doesn't do any too much more to like limit things around it. The one thing I see is, at least for this 4, the 4 has 3 choices. Basically, one of the edges will be left out. And the key thing is that with whatever takes this section of the top, we no longer have the option where it can be fully vertical and ignore this thing to the left. So I think that while we don't know if it comes up or down, the option that's using up and down together quickly has some impossibilities to it. So it must take this straight section to the left, and that puts in this edge. And now we come back to a thing we saw before. With this 4, if this comes down, it has to turn. And so this edge being off makes this direction off. And that looks like that may finally set some starting points for this grid. In particular, it now actually means this 4 can't come up because it would have to immediately turn, and that's no good. So we're breaking through. We're making steady progress. This white has to come through this channel. It's going to have to keep coming up through this space because it can't turn. This will come like so, and this will turn across. We could take one more up here, but actually the thing I want to do before thinking through which of these options it goes is to count the ends in this upper left corner of the grid. There are 3 ends in, so this 4th end has to come through to get the proper parity in the space. Recognize that if we do that parity constraint, the thing that's going to be key is that these 2 ends don't connect and leave these behind on their own. And one way they would connect is if we came up here into the black, we'd have to come across. This white would come across and come down. And so there's a tension of taking this particular section, that if we take this segment, we're going to isolate these 2 ends together. So instead of taking this segment, we come to the left. The black needs to have a longer leg of at least 2. That must be this one, and this one coming up looks like a valid way to fill in that part of the grid. This immediately turns because it's a balanced white clue. We've got this edge that we'll mark in. This black has to come down and to the right. Notice that this circle now, if we came one more to the right, would be imbalanced, so that this black has to have its longer leg going down, at least 2 in length. That means this other black circle has its longer leg coming down, and these ends are going to keep avoiding each other. Like so. We get to here where we've got a white circle needs 3 more. It's going to have to keep going to the right, come up. This black circle needs to have sections to the left and right because those are the only 2 channels left for it. So this comes over, this comes over. This 4 has to take 3 more cells, which can't come down but could come up or to the right. So we'll think through what those mean in a second. The one thing we should do, though, is consider if there's more information that's going to limit how this loop in general gets shaped. And one thing for sure is that these ends don't come together. So one thing I see is that these will have to connect, and there are maybe 2 ways they look to connect, but one of them is imbalanced. We've got 2 to the left, 1 to the right, so right now it's okay. If it came one more across, black is not good, and if it comes one further across, it's not good. So this has to happen in this way for this to be a valid state. This black circle needs to take a longer leg in some direction, so it's not coming left, so this cell is not used. we do want to make sure we're getting through all of the grid, and that's probably where one of these options to come this way or this way, it looks like in both those scenarios, in this case we have 4 cells that are in white. We're going to need to come up this channel to have 4 more cells, and we have effectively isolated a lot of the top of the grid in a way that we can't make these 2 white circles balanced and get a loop end all the way up here to work out. And so where this is problematic, this direction, which is like this, is good. There's another way to work through this, though, which is to see that whichever way this would have went, it's connecting through this black circle, but it's not connecting in a way that it extends through the cell. Like in this direction, it comes like this, and in this direction, it comes like this, but they both force this edge to be unused. And so we get, this shape in the grid. And as we've already seen, we do know it's these 2 legs, up and then to the right. We need to get another end up in this top corner for it to work, and these have to avoid so that they use these circles. So we're going to have to keep growing, but we can't grow any further into this space. So this is where we have our first turn. We turn. This black needs to have a longer leg. The only direction that has more than 1 cell available to us to the right, so we have to go to it. But we also need to still get to this white circle. It only now has 1 set of options for that. And here is going to be some of the connections starting out from this other part, and we have a few limitations. This white can immediately turn and then force this to immediately turn, or it can go 1 more, but those are really the only 2 options. We're going to be a 2 or a 4, and I'm curious if that's going to be informative in any way. The other thing I see is that this option, there's essentially 2 options on this upper side for what's going to be going down, and that's a longer leg to the right or a longer leg straight down. If it is this longer leg straight down, you get this sort of shape happening, and in this situation you get a quick turn and closure and cancellation of the loop. So there's something about the loop ends closing that's a stress point up here. There may be something equivalent down on the bottom. For instance, we have 2 options here. Maybe let's see that we have to come to the right and not to the top. If this comes to the top, we've effectively forced this into the grid, which again isolates this corner. So the different ways to get at this are certainly to see this section going to the right is being forced. It looked like the other thing we saw was that we don't have an option where we can easily come down here, and so this is what was forced in the grid for this in general to be working. We're in a corner that has to take 2 cells out from it because of the quick turn here causing an issue. So we take the 2, and after we take the 2, we have to immediately turn, and that will finish out the puzzle. So a pretty challenging puzzle for sure. Had this elegant start we ran into around the 6 with not being able to go right or left. That then leading to these cancellations around the 4 that led to cancellations around here. And so I don't think there's anywhere else to start than where we did start, which was those few spaces on the left side, and then meandered around the grid. The right side was far harder, in part because it didn't have any number clues to drive it solve. But we got to the one unique solution, and I hope you learned something about how to do this puzzle as well as balance loop in general. See you again soon.